Hi, I'm Carrie, and we are going to talk today about something that has plagued me for my entire life and is quite debilitating. Do you have migraine headaches? Do you have trouble swallowing? And do certain meals, like perhaps tuna fish from a can, seem to close up your throat? Do you pass out every night after dinner or any time you've had a large meal? Do you get dizzy and cloudy thinking and, fuzzy-headed, disoriented, and then have to lay down and sleep after a meal? In fact, do you actually feel like you sort of go into a coma-like sleep that you cannot prevent from coming on and you cannot wake up from for several hours? Do you get really itchy after you eat a certain meal? Do you have chronic sinus infections? The list goes on and on. We're going to take the histamine intolerance quiz together, and then I will be able to explain this more to you. But first of all, let me show you this book. This is the 4-phase histamine reset plan by Dr. Becky Campbell. And we are going to take this quiz. One thing I forgot to mention is that this is going to be a journey that you and I are going on together. I finally learned about histamine intolerance in 2016, and I'm continuing to learn all that I can. I want to take this journey. I want to take you on this journey with me, because there are so many symptoms and so many bodily systems that are involved in histamine intolerance. It impacts the nervous system, the cardiovascular system, the digestive system. You name it, it impacts it. And that is why it can be so debilitating. And that is why it can be so confusing. And like I said, doctors have only known about this maybe in the past 5 years, maybe a little longer, but not long. And like I said, I've been going through this my whole life. And, you get accused of being a hypochondriac because there's always something going wrong with Carrie, right? That's hardly fair. That's hardly fair. And actually, as it turns out, my mother has this and my sister has this, because there's also a genetic component. So let's go on this journey together. And I will, just make videos as I think of more that I want to share with you. And I really, really want to help people with this problem, because there's just not it's like I said, it's only been finally understood in the past handful of years. And it is so debilitating, especially if you have it in a severe form. And I think there's a lot of people that I can help with these videos. So that is my goal. So let's take this quiz. This is the histamine intolerance quiz from the book that I showed you, the 4-phase histamine reset plan by Dr. Becky Campbell. Number 1, do you ever get fatigued after eating certain foods other than high sugar foods? So fatigued to me is an understatement. Maybe for you it would be just fatigued. For me, it is slammed down into a coma-like sleep that I cannot prevent no matter what. That is what it's like for me. And I can't tell you, I've nearly lost jobs because of this. In fact, and it would only happen after lunch. It was fine when I got there in the morning and started my work, but after lunch, I could have one of these, things come on me where first I would be disoriented and dizzy and, really fuzzy-headed and just have this overwhelming need to sleep. And there's nothing I could do to stop it. You might think, oh, well, go get some coffee. No, it's not a normal sleepy situation. In fact, it's your blood pressure taking a nosedive, going very, very low. And it's all histamine related. So, I actually had a job where I had to keep this little folded up, little like picnic blanket type thing. And I had to just keep it in my locker. And then when this would happen, I would go to one of the many restrooms in this facility. Luckily, it was a very large facility. And there was a particular, sorry, I had a burp. There was a particular single-use bathroom that wasn't used very much in a far end of the building. And I would have to go in there, lay out my picnic blanket, and lay down on the floor and sleep and try and sleep this reaction off. If I'd ever been caught, I would have lost my job. But it wasn't that I wanted to sleep on the job. It wasn't that I was lazy. It was because these low blood pressure reactions would come on me, and there was no stopping this coma-like sleep that would come over me. And the only way to deal with it was to try to sleep it off for a little while. Now, I could never do that at work for longer than 30 minutes, locked in this single-use bathroom. I never dared be absent from my work for longer than 30 minutes, but that wasn't often enough time. I would have to set an alarm on my phone and, or watch or whatever it was, depending on the year, and wake myself back up and then stumble out of the bathroom, still dizzy, still fuzzy-headed, and try to cope and do my job. And like I said, I could have lost that job. I could have lost lots of jobs. I was, in fact, finally let go from one job because I just couldn't, I couldn't put out the level of production that they needed. I'd be great in the morning, but then the afternoon, my productivity would fall so far because of these reactions. It has, and then the stress of that actually creates more histamine, which makes it all worse. So it's really debilitating, like I said. So let's go on. So again, that number one was, do you get fatigued after eating meals or large meals specifically? And again, like I said, fatigued is an understatement for some of us. Number two, does your nose run while you are eating certain foods? I've noticed that. I never connected it, but yeah, I've noticed that. Do you suffer from vertigo or dizziness? And it can be as a result of after eating, but it can also be at any time during the day. And especially, do you notice that when you drop something and you reach down to pick it up and then you stand back up, do you get dizzy? There again, there's another symptom of low blood pressure, and histamine intolerance causes low blood pressure. Do you ever feel a tightening in your throat she says after eating or even randomly. For me, actually, it can be the first 1 or 2 bites of a meal. And especially if it's a high histamine food, and we will get into that. The worst one ever was canned tuna. I will never, ever, ever eat tuna fish again, especially not from a can, but not even freshly caught. Never. My throat closed up almost entirely. And I could have had anaphylactic shock, but thank God it stayed open just enough that I could breathe. But histamine intolerance can do that. It can close up your throat. It can cause this constriction in your esophagus, and it's not even necessarily your actual throat. It can be down here in your chest, because that's still part of your esophagus, and that's where it happens to me. And sometimes, very often, practically daily, I can get food stuck because of this constricting thing that happens. And I can't always get it down. And drinking water doesn't necessarily help. Doesn't necessarily help at all. In fact, sometimes it just seems like it lodges it worse. So as inconvenient and crappy as it is, I will have to excuse myself from the table if I'm with other people and I have to go to the bathroom, and I actually have to try and throw it up in order to get it to go down. So like that force of trying to bring it up, I don't even necessarily have to lose more than a little saliva in the process, but that force of bringing it up can then help it go back down. And it's a pain. It's a total pain. And I can't even tell you, anyone who knows me has seen me have to leave the table very early in the meal, typically. And then it seems to get better. It's just weird. It happens usually in the beginning of the meal. But yes, do you ever have this esophagus or throat closing up? Number 5, do you have low blood pressure? Like anytime you go to the doctor, is it on the low side to begin with? Mine is always on the low side. And then, like I said, after dinner, it falls, I think, actually dangerously low, which is why I pass out. Do you suffer from migraine headaches? I had them for 12 years. They're absolute hell. I don't know why that symptom went away, but somehow, by a miracle, that symptom went away. Do you have skin issues like eczema, dermatitis, or psoriasis? Miracle of all miracles, there's a symptom I don't have. You don't necessarily have them all. Thank God I don't have that one. Do you experience anxiety or panic attacks at any time of the day? But specifically, do you notice it happening after a meal? If it's going to happen to me, it seems like it's after a meal. Do you experience any unwanted symptoms after eating fermented foods? Fermented foods wreak havoc on my system. Those are the foods that are highest in histamine. The longer a food is aged, the higher in histamine the food grows. So, excuse me, and I'm going to have to tell it like it is in this video, but if I eat, let's say, sauerkraut, the next thing I know, my belly is rumbling, my belly is filling with gas, and by the next morning, I will have liquid diarrhea. And that's all because of our friend histamine. Number 10, do you experience any unwanted symptoms after eating leftover foods? Again, like I said, the longer that a food is sitting out or aged, in the case of fermented foods, obviously it's an aged food. but also leftovers. The longer that it's either sat out or even sat in the refrigerator, the more it grows in histamine. So I could get some wonderful Thai food takeout, eat it the first night, and do fine with it. You know, well, I'm probably going to pass out anyway, but I will have a lesser reaction, let's say, because it's freshly made. But if I can't, you know, I always can only eat half. So if I leave the other half in the fridge overnight and then I want to have that the next night, I will have a horrible reaction by the next night. Why? Because now it's aged, now it's grown in histamine that much more. Now I will be slammed down into an even heavier coma-like sleep after dinner. So, what do you do about that? You freeze it. You freeze it. That is going to be a lifesaver for you if you suffer from histamine intolerance. Any food you don't finish, you freeze the leftovers. And if you let's say you want to eat it the next day for dinner, fine, but you freeze it that night. You get it back out in the morning first thing, so you've got to get into a routine and into a habit where you take you plan your dinner in the morning, you take it out of the freezer then, put it in the fridge and get it thawing out so that you can have it by dinner. And it's going to be a lifesaver for you. Trust me, that's really going to help you. Number 11, does your face get red easily and stay that way during or after a workout? I would also add, if you drink wine, does your face get all flushed and red? Wine is an aged, fermented drink. And actually so is beer. Any alcohol. If you have histamine intolerance, you have no business drinking alcohol. I won't go near this stuff. So, that's the quiz, and it says, if you answered yes to 0 to 1 of these questions, you may not be suffering from histamine intolerance. If you answered yes to 2 to 5 of these questions, you most likely are suffering from histamine intolerance. If you answered yes to more than 5 of these questions, you may be suffering from severe histamine intolerance. Hello, that's me. Now, she doesn't put in this quiz chronic sinus infections, but that really ought to be in there as well. So, let's talk about histamine. Let's talk about the histamine bucket. So here's a nice picture here in the book. There we are. This is the histamine bucket. Gut issues, environmental issues, medications, diet, stress, hormones. I can't read this because it's upside down in the video, backwards rather, but you can see it. Nutritional deficiencies was the last one. It's the best way to explain this, because you'll notice, say during springtime, when you have spring allergies anyway, and if you have histamine intolerance, you have spring allergies, you'll notice that everything's worse. And this is because it's not that you drink 2 sips of wine and all hell breaks loose necessarily. You have this bucket. So, everything goes in it. So let's say you ate tuna fish from a can for lunch. Then you had sauerkraut with your meal for dinner. Then you had a little bit of wine with dinner. At the same time, it's spring allergies outside. You're taking a certain medication, and that is causing histamine to build. I mean, all of these things, they all add up. They're all adding up into the bucket. Now, then the bucket overflows and you have a full-on histamine reaction. But let's say it's the dead of winter. There's no environmental allergies happening right now. You have learned not to drink wine because it never goes well for you. You, on this particular day, you don't eat any fermented foods that day. You don't eat any sharp cheddar cheese. You don't eat any sauerkraut. You don't eat any yogurt. You don't eat any leftovers. And you have a pretty good day. And you don't even pass out after dinner. I mean, it does happen for me. There are nights where I actually get to stay alert and aware and awake, and it's awesome. It's amazing. So when so that's because my bucket didn't overflow that day. It's as simple as that. Now, I want to go through the causes. And I don't want this first video to get too long. So actually, I think I'm going to wrap this video up, and I'm going to come back and do a second video where I go through the list of causes of histamine intolerance. Why does this happen to you? Why does it happen to you and not someone else? Because like I said, myself, my mother, my sister, we all have this. So there's your genetic component. My father did not. So, like I said, now, there's a lot of us that have it. We have it to varying degrees. My mother, my sister, and I all have it pretty bad. I have it the worst. My sister has it the second worst, and my mother is last. Like I said also, and I think you can tell from some of the things I've had to say in this video, it can be very, very debilitating. There's one other thing I want to say before I wrap up this video, and that is, if you start having a reaction after a meal, you start feeling dizzy, disoriented, confused, fuzzy-headed, your heart starts racing, do not drive a car. I cannot emphasize that enough. Even if this is happening to you at a time where you need to drive home, don't do it. I was in a situation once where the reaction was coming on and I thought I could beat it. I thought I could get home and beat it. And I almost did. I almost made it, but I didn't. 2 blocks from my house, there was a stoplight. And I knew the reaction was getting worse, but I thought, oh, I'm 2 blocks. I'm 2 blocks away. I'll be fine. Well, the light turned red, and I passed out. I passed out behind the wheel. I'm telling you how debilitating this is for me, and it can be for other people. Because I passed out, I didn't put my foot on the brake. The light turned red, and I slammed into the vehicle in front of me. I mean, not so hard. I mean, it was hard enough. I was probably going 25, 30 miles an hour. It was hard enough. Luckily for me, it was actually some people that are probably illegals. They were from Mexico, and they had the big old trailer that they were hauling behind their truck full of lawnmowers and what have you. I slammed into that trailer. It didn't do a thing to the trailer. It was fine. Obviously, the impact shook me back conscious. It hurt my car. It didn't hurt their trailer. I went to pull over. We had to get through the light, and I went to pull over, and they took off. They just took off. That's why I think maybe they were illegally here. They didn't want anything to do with that situation. And I was like, okay, well, it didn't impact them anyway, so fine. and I had to replace the hood of my car and the front fender. So I learned a very, very hard lesson, and thank God my angels were there and didn't let it be any worse. Never, ever, ever get behind the wheel. And when you're starting to feel like this, and if you're already driving and you're feeling like this, you pull over and you sleep it off. This is why I can't go out at night if there's a meal involved. I mean, the only way I could go out with friends at night is if I fasted and didn't eat anything, which would be very difficult, especially if going out with the friends meant eating first. I'd have to sit there and drink water? So, this thing, this illness, this disease, this set of symptoms, this whatever you want to call it, this syndrome is very debilitating. And it causes me to be even more of a hermit than I would already be, since I'm very introverted as it is. Because I can't go out and socialize in the evening. That's what it does to me. So, like I said, I'm going to take you on this journey with me. The more I learn, the more I will share. I've already learned a lot. And I want to help everyone that I can who deals with this. It has a name. Thank God it has a name. It's not just this bizarre collection of symptoms. It has a name. And by the way, when the thing that happens after the meal, the passing out after the meal, it's postprandial hypotension. That it's caused by the histamine intolerance, but what that's called when you're passing out after you eat is postprandial hypotension. So you can look that up. And I will be back soon to share more with you. Thank you for sharing this journey with me. See you later.